There's a modern trend of people who want to shoot video as flat as possible. And by that I mean as low contrast and usually as low saturation as possible. This is usually, like a log picture profile, S log, V log, C log, D log, whatever the log variant is. People seem to want to shoot really, really flat because they feel like it gives them the most dynamic range and the most gradability or flexibility in post-production. But I would really caution against it. There are certain cameras where if you're shooting raw, you're shooting raw, so it doesn't matter. Raw data is raw data. But if you're shooting in any kind of compressed format, whether it's a ProRes, H.264, or anything like that, you're going to have to pick a picture profile that's going to adjust the curve of how the color information is captured and how it's stored. Now, if you're shooting something like ProRes 444 or something, a really, really high-end codec, you can probably get away with shooting log, S log, V log, whatever it is. And if you have proper colorists treating that footage, you should be able to make some really nice looking footage. But the trend is more with the consumer enthusiast who is going out and they just bought a DSLR and they want to shoot as flat as possible. This really got kicked off when Canon introduced the Technicolor picture profile for the 5D Mark II and other Canon DSLRs. And I really think that led a lot of people down the wrong track. When you have an 8-bit 420 H.264 compressed codec, you have a very limited window to fit all of your color information. And when you shoot that flat, you are stretching your image so thin because it's trying to store all that information. And rather than actually giving you good information in the sections that you would want, usually skin tones or the detail parts of your image, you're spreading all that information out. And what it ends up doing is it makes you have to push that footage further in post-production and color grading. And those codecs usually cannot stand up to that kind of push and pull. When you're trying to do that much color grading to the image, the codecs usually just fall apart. Now, there are a lot of people who will disagree and they will say they shoot as flat as possible in all situations because it gives them the most control and the most flexibility. Well, if those people are happy with the results they're getting, I can't tell them otherwise. I'm not going to convince them. But me, myself, in the stuff that I've shot, anytime I've shot too flat, it has been a nuisance to try and save or recover that footage. Because a lot of times I am shooting with a GH4, for example. Recently, over the past year, I've been shooting with the GH4 as my primary camera for most shoots. And if you shoot with Cinelike D, and now they're even coming out with a log picture profile, which again might be fine if you're recording over HDMI to an Atomos Shogun or an Odyssey 7Q. If you're recording ProRes, it's a little bit of a separate thing. I've still had issues with ProRes not handling the way I'd like it to in post-production. But regardless, let's just talk about the internal codecs right now. I personally shoot Cinelike V on the GH4. And the reason I do that is because it is flatter than some of the other high contrast picture profiles that are meant for kind of more right off the camera. It looks how you envision it, looking finally. But I don't necessarily want that because I do want a little bit of flexibility in post-production. I want to be able to tweak it slightly by, maybe making it a little bit less contrasty or adding more contrast or pushing and pulling the image slightly within reason. And these are small adjustments, but you can still be, the GH4 footage is fairly flexible. I'm not going to say it's not, There's a lot of people who, though, take it to the extreme and they say, no, what you shoot is what you print, and that's what you should always aim to get it right on set. And if you can shoot that way, then great. But I found that most of the time, it's not just you who has the final say in the product. You have to either work with a client or other people who are collaborating on the project, and they all have their input of, let's make it look like this, or let's make it a little bit more blue, or, oh, it's too saturated, or it's not saturated enough, whatever it might be. And so you have to have some flexibility to make those adjustments. But if you can get it close within the window with shooting like something that's, more baked in look, then I think you're going to find that the results ultimately will be better than shooting with a log picture profile and recording it to, a compressed 8-bit 420 H.264 codec because you just don't have that flexibility. I've seen a lot of footage and a lot of people shooting really, really flat, and it's hurt their final image quality because they could have, shot it a little bit with a little bit more contrast, with a little bit more saturation, or a little bit more of a look baked in, and the camera would have stored all that color information right there rather than having to push it in post-production. A story I'll tell real quick is when Technicolor released their picture profile for the 5D Mark II, I was excited. I thought, this is the way to do it. We'll have so much flexibility in post-production. And so we shot a show like that. And when I took it into color grading, it was so flat and so desaturated that the moment I started introducing color information back into it, there was stuff that didn't have any color information. It was, there were parts of one of the actresses' hair. She had, it was a lighter kind of blonde hair, but it was shot so desaturated that those some strands of hair were gray. So even when I boosted the saturation and introduced that color back into the footage to make it look like how I wanted, there were still these like hairs that were gray because they didn't have any color information to begin with. Imagine, taking a black and white photo and trying to add saturation to it. Well, you can't do it if it's baked in. There's nothing to start with. Is it red? Is it blue? Is it green? Who knows? So if you're trying to saturate black and white, it doesn't work. And so you have to be really careful with that kind of stuff. Ultimately, it was fine. We were able to work it out, and it wasn't too much of an issue where it was really, really noticeable. But I certainly noticed it, and it really scared me away from it, ever doing anything like that again. So just be really careful that what you're capturing, you can shoot too flat, and you can shoot too desaturated to the point where it will not be recoverable, or you'll have to push it too much, and then you're introducing noise or compression artifacts or whatever it might be. So if you're shooting with a DSLR, any modern DSLR, it's probably not recording at a deep enough color depth to where you're going to be able to do some of that flexibility. And even if you're recording ProRes 444, still be cautious, because you have to take the time and do the extra work and know what you're doing in color correction and color grading to get the fullest advantage of that. Because it's very easy to get it wrong, and it takes a lot more work and effort to make it look normal. When oftentimes you can shoot it that way on set, get it looking the way you want there, or at least close to, like I was talking about, in that window, and then your post-production efforts are reduced. And even still, if you have a strong colorist, they're going to be able to do whatever they want with that footage within reason, as long as it's, again, ProRes 444, something that's more flexible than the internal codecs. So just keep that in mind next time you're shooting.